And I always had a nice fascination with knives, and I was well versed in the practice of knives since primary school. So I thought I'll take this as an opportunity to go back to the school and do a siege. So the very first time I got arrested was actually a fun one. I went back to my high school and took a kitchen knife, and I held the school siege, and I made national news. I was in the national newspaper. I was raised here in Sydney City, the inner city areas, housing areas, amongst all the flats, housing commission houses. My childhood was, at a young age, was good. I had a good childhood.
What about your education?
My education, let's put it this way. Most of the schoolwork I'd done was in boys' homes, juvenile detention. To put in a perspective, the level of my education, although I'm an exceptionally intelligent person considering my circumstances, but yeah, most of the school I'd done was in boys' homes in jail, yeah. And it was fun.
Why did that happen? Why was you in boys' homes and jails?
Oh, well, depends how Jordan Peterson you want me to get with this, all right? Nah, but at the end of the day, like I'm from the inner city area of Sydney, and crime and drug addiction is all part of the culture here, or very much was. Members of my family were famous criminals and good thieves, stuff like that. Drugs in my family, so it was inevitable for me to follow that path. So as early as I could, you know, the age when you're out and about and you're allowed to hit the streets and everyone gets their character. You know, some kids become skateboarders and some kids become footy players and some kids become career criminals. And that's what I chose. So I ended up in boys' homes and yeah, pretty much raised in boys' homes, yeah, bro.
What was the first thing you was ever arrested for? What was the first crime you committed?
The first crime I committed, the first thing I was arrested for are two very different things, but we'll talk about the first thing I was arrested for. It was while I was still going, so obviously it's the first thing I was arrested for, so I hadn't been at boys' homes yet. I was still going to high school. I think I was in year 8, 14 years old, and I was stealing mobile phones. You know, mobile phones we're talking the year 2000 here. So when mobile phones just come out, or the Nokias, you know, playing Snake. So I used to go around stealing kids' phones and whatever. And apparently, someone gave me up for stealing their mobile phone, so I got suspended from school. And I always had a nice fascination with knives, and I was well versed in the practice of knives since primary school. So I thought I'll take this as an opportunity to go back to the school and do a siege. So the very first time I got arrested was actually a fun one. I went back to my high school and took a kitchen knife, and I held the school siege, and I made national news. I was in the national newspaper.
Spanian,
yeah.
Tell me about that story from the start.
You want to hear that story in depth? All right. So, like I said, the first part's already been said. Someone gave me up, I got suspended, don't come back to school. The next day I went to the school, right? Got a kitchen knife. And I thought I'll blend in. What my plan was to go door to door, classroom to classroom with my kitchen knife and sort of intimidate someone into admitting that they gave me up. I wanted to know who gave me up. So, you know, I don't know what I was going to do, to be honest. Like, I'll be straight out with you. I didn't go there with the intention to kill everyone. I'm not Charles Manson, but, you know, like, I just wanted to make a statement, you know? And I was at that age, 14 years old, you know? And then, so I went there, class went, and I went with my class like I wasn't suspended, right? And I presumed that I'd be able to blend in for a bit before they clicked on. But anyway, class went in, and my very first class, I walked in the door, teacher turned straight to me and said, my real name's Anthony, right? You all know me as, well, you don't know me, you're learning me as Spanian, but yeah, my real name's Anthony. So teacher turned straight to me and said, Anthony, you're not supposed to be here, go home. And I thought, fuck, bro, I'm done already, you know what I mean? I'm already busted, it hasn't even been 1 second. So I pulled my knife out and I let it commence from there. So I pulled out this big kitchen knife And I turned to the class and I said, nah, listen, which fucking dog gave me up? Like, who gave me up for stealing their phone? Oh, and it's some frets, I'll kill you, you motherfuckers, this and that, whatever. And everyone was just like, oh, like, nah, like, oh, we don't know. And then I thought, so no one in that class admitted it. So I thought in my head, I'll go door to door and do this, you know, like along the classrooms, along the hallway. So I went to the next classroom, burst through the door, same thing, same spiel. Who gave me up? I'll fucking kill yous, blah, blah, blah. I made it to about the fifth class. Mind you, at the third, I was improvising, right? I was doing psycho improvising. So when I got to the third door, the doors were unlocked. Like I could just open them. But for dramatic effect, I was booting it open, you know, so it's like a movie scene. And I was booting it, door, wood flying everywhere, and I'll be like, I'll kill you all, this and that. But when I got to the fifth classroom, there was a little bit of a struggle. And principal or whoever it was must have got word. So they put an alarm over the system, whatever, like evacuation call. And I just remember hearing on the radio, like, everyone to the assembly area, blah, blah, blah. Mind you, this was like 23 years ago, so forgive me if I don't know every single word. So everyone started running. All the classrooms are clearing. And I thought, well, this is getting a bit further than I thought. So I thought I'll try to blend in. You know, I was going to leave it there. And I put my knife away. And I had my school uniform on, so I thought I'll try to blend in with everyone. So I joined the evacuation, and I'm evacuating. And I remember kids saying like, what's going on? Like, is this a drill? And I was answering them. I was going, yeah, I don't know, it might be a fire or something, you know? Anyway, so we got down the stairs, and when we got to the assembly area in between all of the big buildings, there was like 300 students there. And I come down the stairs trying to blend in. And the vice principal, whoever had the megaphone, I honestly don't remember, called me out straight away. Anthony, just go home, like that. And bro, like, I'm telling you, lad, like, I was going to leave it at that. They bring this on themselves. So I'm standing there, and then 300 kids look at me from my year to year 12 kids, you know? And I thought, fuck, like, I got to go on with this. So it was the funniest scene, but I was like Braveheart. I was in front of everyone. I pulled out the knife again, and I'm like, that's it, I'll kill yous all. And the whole class scattered, all right? This is where it started to get out of control. So I didn't plan for this. The whole school scatters. And they're hitting the streets. Like, I'm talking kids are running in the streets. Like, teachers are getting the kids, like, just leave the school premises. So I'm chasing them, and just like, I don't want to stab anyone, you know what I mean? It's not that serious. So I'm just trying to scare people, like swinging near their face. And if I'm catching them while they're running, like kicking them in the back and stuff. And I got to the main road, and all the students had ran this way, the majority of them. They'd run to the main road, and I ran out, and I was just going to chase them down the streets and that. And I noticed that the teachers were at every resident's doors, like down the street, and they were like banging. Like it's more serious than I thought, you know, and they were banging, and they're saying, let us in, there's like a murderer. And so like there's residents opening their doors and like piling packs of 30 kids in each house. And then at that point I thought, look, this has gone too far. I better just like hook it, you know, I was gonna step. So I ran down the back of the oval. On my way there was coincidentally, a class of my year 8 students playing softball down the back. So they had like sports. So they weren't part of this whole fiasco, you know. And I seen them, chase them off, chase them over the fence. And one of the teachers or whoever at some point during this had gone and round up a whole bunch of public heroes, construction workers and all these idiots. And they come chase me with a shovel and obviously bash me. I'm a 14-year-old kid. Even though I got a knife, there's like that many grown men with shovels. So I got smashed with a shovel, held on the floor. News came. There was like this news, Channel 7 news, Channel 10 news, and then all police. And that was my first ever arrest, brother, yeah. It was very dramatic. And so first ever arrest, and obviously, you know, if it's your first time arrested, they let you off. They weren't letting me off that one. So I ended up in boys' homes. I spent 4 weeks in boys' homes for that. And they let me out on some type of, they evaluated me to be mentally unstable. So at that point, they'd given me some order of counselling in the community. So I got out after 4 weeks. And that was my first ever experience, brother.
And then what was next, Spanian?
What was next? So after that, I think I was just getting arrested. So we're talking 14, if you're talking my juvenile times, 14 to 18, I spent most of that inside. I think one time in my boredom inside a cell, I'd calculated the amount of time I stayed out and this and that. I think during my juvenile period, I was out for about 8 months over that 4-year period. It was, I can't tell you exactly each time what it was because there was multiple, you know what I mean? I was in and out, 3 months in, 1 week out, 6 months in, 2 days out, stuff like that. But at that point in time, we were doing ram raids, we're stealing shit boxes with screwdrivers, smashing them through shops, smashing them through offices, loading it up with computers and stuff like that. During my juvenile period, got done for a lot of ram raids, break and enters, stuff like that.
What are the juvenile centres like in this country? Because in London or the UK, should I say, they're considered to be, I guess, even worse than the prisons, just due to everyone's got a point to prove at that age. Is it the same here, or...?
Yeah, you're the first person that's ever really asked it that way after all of these podcasts that I've done, brother. That's a good question. I'll tell you what I find about juvenile compared to the adult system in Australia. It's a lot more aggressive on a lower level. So there's a lot more lower end aggression in juvenile. Everyone will fight over anything because the consequences in juvie are very small. So you have a fight, you go to your cell for the night, right? So people, we're fighting over everything. You know what I mean? There's punch-ons, 4 or 5 punch-ons a day because there's no consequences. So you only got to get called a gronk here. And like, there was an old thing like, if you call someone a gronk, it's on, you know what I mean? Gronk here in Australia means like, how would you, like, trying to think how would they say, gronk in England, bruh? Whatever, bruh. Anyway, point of the story is gronk is a diss word. So you chuck that out there, the fight's on, people punching on all the time. You go to your cell for the night, you come back out, everyone's friends. In jail, there's big consequences to fights. Like, you have a fight, you're gone to Segro, you lose all of your property, you're sitting in there for a month, you got no food, you got no TV. So people hold back on the fights a lot. So there's way less fights. But when there is fights, they're a lot more serious. So you got to contemplate that. Like, if I'm gonna smash, I'm gonna go to Segro for how long? I'm gonna get in good. So in juvie, people aren't getting stabbed, people aren't getting this and that. Everyone's just, it's like, box. It's like sparring in there, right? You know what I mean? It's part of training.
And then what was next in Spanian? So after doing 4 years in the juvenile system?
Yeah, I've done about 3.5 of those 4 years in the juvenile system, and then graduated to prison. So when I was about 16, 17, I become a heroin addict. Started injecting heroin, which was all part of our culture around here in Sydney City. Heroin addiction, thieving, stuff like that. And so my crimes had changed accordingly. So I was doing a lot more junkie type crimes, low level crimes.
1 minute, Spanian. That's massive. How did that happen?
How did I become a heroin addict? Funny as this may sound, when you're growing up around these inner city flats around here, heroin was, you know how you hear people say, oh, when we went to school, you smoked, all the cool kids smoke cigarettes and you sneak down and you smoke your cigarettes behind your canteen and blah, 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 all those yarns. That was heroin to us. In where I grew up in the decade that I was a kid around here, early 2000s, it's like if you weren't on the heroin, you weren't one of the boys. As funny as that sounds, but that's the truth. All the older boys that we looked up to, the bank robbers, the ram raiders, the searchers, they were all heroin addicts. Our peers were heroin addicts. It was like becoming one of the boys. It was almost to the extent that when we were all heroin addicts, we looked at people that weren't on the heroin as gronks. It's like, hey, you're not even one of the boys. Like, you're not even on the gear. You're not even hustling. You're not even shooting up. In hindsight, that sounds ridiculous. And I know that's not the case for a lot of the world, but here it was. So there is no tragic circumstances in which I become a heroin addict. I'm not trying to hide any pain or anything like that. It was like, almost like, fuck, I can't wait to be a heroin addict. Yeah, bro, where's the heroin? I'm one of the boys now. Let's you know what I mean? Yeah, it was just all part of the culture here.
That's crazy.
And lucky for me, and barely any of the boys that I grew up with in these circumstances, I ended up getting off when I was 21 in prison. But a lot of all of the boys haven't, and their lives have suffered accordingly. Their life is in jail, 20% of them are dead. Yeah.
How did you get off the heroin? Was it, I know you said you was in jail. From what I'm aware, it's probably the most addictive substance on the planet.
How did I get off the heroin? One day, bro, like in the midst of my junkiness, whatever you want to call it, I'm down at a prison out in the country, doing an 18-month sentence, whatever, far from home, junked off my head. And to that extent, I never had a perspective of me being a junkie. In my head, I was Spanian from Sydney City, the mad money maker, the good-looking cunt. You know what I mean? Like, I was fresh, I was violent, I was the man in my head, right? Because being a heroin addict was so normal that it didn't come into play. One day, but don't ask me what, right? One day, I walked in my cell, it was lock-in, it was like 10, 11 o'clock at night, by myself in a cell, little shaving mirror that we got in our cell. Looked in it a million times, brother. I walked past there and I looked in the mirror. This sounds corny, but this is the fucking truth. I walked in it in that one split second. This is why I say, I don't know if it was a psychosis or divine intervention. I seen the true me. I looked in that mirror and I seen a full, ugly, putrid, junkie, loser, like that. I seen it. I looked and I was like, I shit myself. I was like, what the fuck? I spent in that night 2 or 3 hours staring at myself and I didn't know what the fuck was going on. In 2 hours, my whole perspective of myself had changed and I was embarrassed of myself. I was embarrassed of the way I looked. I was embarrassed of what I had become. Even my perspective of the boys in the wing with me. So in the wing, when we get released, I thought, yeah, I'm in the prison wing, you know, we're all this and that. I thought everyone was mad there. I thought prison was the collection of all the sick in Sydney, you know what I mean? If you're in prison, you're a mad. And I walked out even the next day, skipping forward to the next day, I walked out and every lad that I looked at, my mates, the randoms, I just looked at as a pack of putrid junkies. Like, I don't know what happened to me in that hour, but it changed my whole perspective. I'm not saying it changed my perspective of crime. If anything, it led to me being a better criminal, but it changed my perspective on myself. And that night, listen here carefully, I was addicted to buprenorphine, which is the substitute for heroin addiction. It's like methadone, the tablet version. Heroin, injecting since I was a teenager, right? And that's the hardest thing to beat, needles. People think that certain drug is the hardest thing to overcome, but the feeling of putting that steel in your arm and injecting it, and whatever substance it may be, hitting you instantly is a very addictive thing. In fact, I might say it's more addictive than the substances themselves. I gave that up. Cigarettes. I was smoking, back then we had pouches, White Ox, you know, I was smoking 100, 150 cigarettes a week, whatever. All on that same night, I said to myself, in that 2 hours, I'm looking in the mirror, I said to myself, I promised myself that I'm gonna be a better criminal, I'm gonna be fit, I'm gonna be sexy, I'm gonna be a mad money maker. All of this money that I'm out here making, I prided myself as some mad money maker. Oh yeah, I'd steal your laptop, I'd break it, do a ram raid and feel... And I give all the money away to drug dealers. I was a bum. And I promised to never be a bum again. I promised to never be ugly again. I promised to never be a shit fighter again. So I come out the next day and I gave all of my stuff away. We had syringes. I had syringes hidden in the kettle, drugs in my mattress, whatever I had. I said to the boys, I go, take everything out of my cell. They got excited. They thought it was Christmas. So they flew in, ripped my cell to shreds. They thought I was spinning out. And I might have been spinning out. And they looked at me like, even a couple of them that actually had care for me said like, bro, don't give all your stuff away, bro. Like, are you spinning out? Like, you're going to be sick. You're going to be hanging out. I said, brother, take it. Don't ever say that to me again. And from that day, that was in September 2007, I was 21 years old. And I have been off drugs, cigarettes, no alcohol, no nothing now since 2007. What's that? 15, how long was it? 16 years, 16 years, brother. I hung out, like obviously I withdrew, hanging out we call it. I withdrew very strongly for a week and a half, no sleeping, couldn't stand up. And I loved every moment of it. I loved every moment of it. People ask me nowadays, because I had this goal. I'm gonna be the drug dealer. I'm gonna be the one taking your money. I'm gonna be the one fucking your girl. I'm gonna be the one doing this, dude. That's gonna be me. That's not gonna be other people anymore. I'm not letting that happen to me. I'm gonna be the GOAT of the hood, you know what I mean? I'm the hood superstar. And that was my intention for a long time. And people say to me, because, like I said, to a lot of people, it's a big dramatic thing. Wow, you were injecting heroin since you were 16, 17. Like, wow, how did you get off it? And they ask me until today, do you get cravings? Do you get cravings? Like, do you see heroin and it's like, oh, and crumble? And I'm like, listen, let me tell you one perfect way of saying it, all right? If you've been eating something, right? I've said this before. If you've been eating shit for 10, 5, 20, 30 years, I don't care how long you've been eating shit, you thought it was bubble gum, looks like bubble gum, tastes like bubble gum, you put it in your mouth and it chews like bubble gum. And I come to you one day, just like what happened to me in the cell, and I knock the dust off that bubble gum and I show you that shit. Look, you thought it was bubble gum. What are you gonna do? You're gonna say this, you're gonna go, oh, yuck, 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 and you're gonna go wash your hands. You just noticed it's shit. Then I say to you, do you crave that anymore? Because you've done it for 25 years. What are you going to say? Of course I don't fucking crave it. It's shit. It don't matter how long I've done it. So that's what happened, brother. And that's how I can be here 15, 16 years later and it ain't a thing. You know what I mean?
On the back of that then, Spanian, if you could go back in time, would you have never touched heroin?
If I could go back in time, would I have never have touched heroin? I don't regret touching heroin. I don't regret it, because I tell you one thing, bro, when you go back in time and not do things, at the end of the day, I'm here right now and my life's sweet. What if I didn't touch heroin? If I didn't touch heroin, and I'm putting this in perspective, this is real, right? At the end of the day, I'm here and I love who I am and I love what I've done. If I didn't touch heroin when I was 16, maybe I would have been playing footy and crossed the road and got killed. How can you say, you know what I mean? Like, the life choices that you make are your path. I could have been anything in the world, including dead. So I'm happy that I'm here and I have 2 healthy children and I have a good life and I'm alive. So how can I take anything away? Anything of your past you take away or switch, you're probably going to end up dead, you know what I mean?
And then what was next for you, Spanian?
After that, after me getting off heroin, so when I got off heroin, that didn't change the criminality in me at that point in my life. So I was 21 years old. If anything, I emphasized the criminality after that. Like I told you, I wanted to be a better criminal. So my goals had gone from being the lad in the hood that stabs everyone and makes the money, but he's on the drugs. I wanted to be the smart. I wanted to be the smart cunt. I wanted to be the cunt with the cars, the jewelry, this and that. And that was my goal. And I set out on a mission and I couldn't wait to get out of prison. Thought about it every day. Every time I was in prison, when I get out, I'm going to kill it, I'm going to kill it, I'm going to kill it. And stop the violence, because the violence is, out of all the types of crime, and this is what I say to people like to see me now because of what I do, and I tell my prison stories. And my story is like a story of redemption in a way. They confuse me with like I'm someone out to save the kids. They confuse me a lot with that, but I just tell it how it is. And what I say to kids is, I'm not going to tell you kids to not be a criminal. I'm not a policeman and I never will be, and I'll never tell someone not to be a criminal, but I will tell you one thing from my lessons. Don't do violence and rubbish crime. Go make money. Do something that's worth it. Imagine being a dickhead that sits in jail for 25 years for stabbing someone. What a fucking loser, cuz. You didn't even make money. You didn't even have a mad life. You know how many idiots are sitting in jail? Pretty much. Let's put it like this. What are you in jail for? Oh, because this lad thought he was tough. And what happened? I was tougher than him. Oh, so what happened? Oh, and I got 25 years for being tougher than him. Good on you, mate. See you later, brother. What a loser. At least if you're in jail, what did you do? Oh, bro, I was killing it outside. I had this car, all these women everywhere. Swear, I got money. I'll get out to it. So that's the only thing that I say. And the reason I say that at this point in this yarn is because that was my intention after that. So I only just turned really money focused with my crime, and still end up in and out of jail for it. End up being a drug dealer, fairly successful drug dealer, selling heroin and cocaine. Done exactly what I wanted to do, switched the circumstances and done it to the best of my ability and was good at it. Still got arrested though, wasn't that good, eh? But anyway, that didn't bother me, because I felt like I belonged in jail. So going back to jail was nothing at that point in time. The times have changed now, I don't feel that way anymore. But yeah. That's what happened directly after that. I got out and become a worse criminal and done bigger sentences. So then my sentences started jumping from 18 months, a year here to like 4 years, 6 years. So my last sentence was like 6 years. And so in fact, sometimes like your way of thinking, it's better to be a shit criminal. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Spanian, can you tell me what was your worst memory of being in prison?
Worst memory of being in prison? If you're thinking of it in some dramatic sense, what is the most violent thing, this and that? If you're thinking of it in some spiritual sense, they're two very different things. But in the most dramatic sense, was probably the first time that I was within earshot of an attempted murder. The bloke didn't die, I won't pretend he did. But I was only, so where was I? I was in Parklea prison. I was 18 or 19, first or second time in. And the cell right next to me, and we share airways. So if you fart in one cell, I'm breathing it in this cell. That's how close we are. And it was like 5:45 in the morning. And I think from what I could hear, the two cellies over there didn't know each other. And the one on the top bunk kept jumping down. He mustn't have had cigarettes. And sneaking in mateys, like on the bottom bunk, sneaking in his pouch and like stealing a cigarette. And I just heard a commotion, but you just had your fucking hand in my cigarette, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, long story short, with a little argument, about the cigarettes, he just went in a full stab fest on him. And it's not that the stab fest was scary to me. Like when I was 16, 17, whatever, 18, 19, I was known for stabbing people. A lot of the times I was locked up was stabbing people, attempted murders and stuff like that. But it was the reaction and the rawness of the bloke who was getting stabbed. And he was like, this was a grown man. The bloke that was getting stabbed may have been about 35, 40 years old. And he was like crying in a way I never heard someone cry before, and asking for help in a way that was like directed to the skies. And it was it made me very like sad and scared myself. Like, you know what I mean? Because I was in a cell next to it, so it's almost like I was there. The wing's dead silent, and it's just like a lad, he's just repeatedly stabbing someone. I can hear the stabs. That's not the thing. It was just the way the bloke reacted. He was like crying like it was his way out. You know what I mean? Like there was nothing left. And the rawness of his voice and his cry, it were like sent chills down my body. Like it was, it had me shook. It had me shook for a few days. I remember that morning just being shook. Like it was the first, when the first time in your life you see the savageness of life. Us in the Western world and Australia and America and England and that, and we're not used to that shit. You know what I mean? As gangster as we are, or as this, we're not used to that just complete savageness. You know what I mean? Like people chopped up and shit. Like, that was my first experience of someone reacting like that. And that left me shook. I walked around like a different person for 2 days. I was like, really like, yeah, it was weird. Like an anxiety is like, bro, that's fucked. Like that's fucked. And then I got over it and then got used to it. Yeah, so for that reason, that was a very dramatic moment in my jail career. And I was 18 years old, whatever.
And as well, what would you say is the most heinous or the most dangerous crime that you were sentenced for as an adult?
Most dangerous? Yeah, all right, so before I had come to terms with lowering the violence, there's a little spectrum out in my head, money and violence, brother, you know, they don't work hand in hand, brother. They don't go good together. So when violence used to be here and money used to be there, I used to be a bit of a psycho, right? I'm actually a clinically diagnosed high-range psychopath, whatever the fuck they reckon. I don't really care. It got me 10% off my sentence, so I'm happy. You know what I mean? Are you happy being a psychopath? Yeah, I got 10% off. That's it. But I remember one time, one of my mates, and I was a bit stupid with the knives and that, so we're in jail. I'm getting out in 8 months. 8 months to go. My mate's on the phone to a girl, talking to the girl. The girl's boyfriend found out that he's ringing her, whatever. So I'm overhearing, he jumps on, he's arguing with my mate, stop bringing my fucking girlfriend, this and that. My mate's, shut the fuck up, I ring who I want, blah, 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 bullshit argument. And I thought, look, I'll jump on and I'll bridge up. So I jumped on, I go, listen, dickhead, fucking what are you gonna do about it? Who are you? You're nobody. I'll get out, I'll fucking smash your head in, I'll kill you. That's what I said to him. Silly me, I took it serious. 8 months later, I full remembered. It's like I wrote it in my diary, cuz this is, I swear on my fucking children's life, drop dead right now. It's like, I didn't literally write in my diary, but what I mean is like, it's like I put in my diary, all right, I told this bloke I'm gonna kill him, so I'll get out and kill him. 8 months later, I got out. On the day that I got out of jail, I mean that when you get out, you don't even, the only thing you get out of, you leave all your property for the boys, but you take your personal letters and photos, right? Makes sense. I hadn't even been home to drop off my personal letters or photos yet. So I'm walking back down the hood. My mum lived outside the hood, right? I walk back down the hood. No, I'll go home later. Go to my mate's house, stash the letters and stuff. I get a change of clothes, put some shoes on because you get out in thongs. And I talk to my mate half an hour, small talk. Yeah, bro, what's going on, this and that? And I go, hey, bro, where's this bro? I'm going to go knock this I've been out for an hour, I promise you. So I went down his house. He wouldn't come out. He wouldn't come out. He didn't have a clue who I was. Mind you, in his head, 8 months ago, he's not going to remember arguing on the phone with someone. In my head, it's like, yeah, it's going down, bro. So he's like, who the fuck are you? I'm like, bro, I told you, bro, 8 months ago, bros, when I get out, I'm going to kill you. He wouldn't come out. I went to the petrol station. I filled petrol up. Don't ask me why. Walking back with petrol, I was going to burn his house down. And my mate's the whole way, my mate that's with me, he's going, dickhead, you're on camera at the petrol station, don't do it. I'm saying, yeah, he's right. All right, he's right. I wasn't going to do it. But when I got there, I still wanted to splash petrol on it for dramatic effect. And then he come out holding his 2 kids. Like a little bitch, he runs inside his house, gets like a baby and a little 5-year-old girl, whatever, and goes, look, bro, I'm here with my kids. And so I was all right, bro. So I said, fucking wait till I see you, bros. I'm going to kill you. Watch this. Went up the street. I still couldn't let it go. Dumb. Like, I'm not saying this is smart crime. I'm telling you this because how stupid I was. Still wouldn't let it go. So I went to the shop, got a box cutter, right? $2 box cutter. And I thought, fuck, I'm going to wait till this comes out of his house and I'm going to stab him, right? I'm going to stab him, right? Not kill him, whatever, bro. Anyway, let's not call it kill because... yeah, let's just say I'm going to stab him. So I went up the street. This is the funny part. I went up the street. So I went up the street and waited in the bushes. So I know if he comes out, there's only one way to the shops and to where the boys are selling yandi. He has to come past these bushes. So I sat in these bushes with a box cutter ready to stab this idiot for like 3 hours. I swear more than 2 hours, almost 3 hours. And he rode past on a push bike. I jumped out, pulled him off the push bike, punched him in the face, stabbed him in the neck and hooked it. And I end up on the run for it. Yeah, so, yeah, end up on the run. So the dickhead gave me up, told the police and this and that. You know what? I'll give him this credit. I'll give the bloke this credit. He tried to lie to the police. He tried to tell the police he fell off his push bike, right? Because he's one of the boys, apparently. So we're not that willing to give each other up to the police, you know? So at least he had an attempt of not being a dog, right? Said I fell off on the push bike. They left. Before he got his neck all stitched up, they done an x-ray on his neck to clean it out, and two segments of the box cutter had broken off in his neck. So I hit him with force and it snapped 2 segments and they were still in there. And it's what got me done. So they pulled box cutter out of his neck, and so they rang the police back up and said, mate, this bloke's here, he's got box cutter in his neck. So they come back and they were hitting him with all these threats. Mate, we know you got stabbed, you got half a knife in your neck. And then like a fucking coward, he goes, yeah, Spanian stabbed me. So anyway, yeah, blah, blah, that's it. So I ended up getting charged for attempted murder for that. Wound with the intent to murder is the exact name of the charge. But I fought it in court and I got a hung jury. Jury couldn't decide. Went to the second trial and the prosecutor before the second trial offered to lower the charge so I don't go through a second trial. It's very expensive for the government. You know how it works. And so they offered me a charge of recklessly wound, which is the lowest possible charge you can get for stabbing someone. So I'm going from the second highest, just under murder, intent to murder, to the lowest. And I'm already on remand for 18 months at this point. So I thought, fuck, you know what I mean? Like I couldn't have that long left. Recklessly wound's not that bad of a charge. So I pled guilty and I got 3.5 on the bottom. So I had to do another 2 years, which is a good result. Because if I committed to the trial and then unlucky got found guilty, I would have got 8, 9, 10, 11 years. So at that point, I'm thinking, but I could get out in 18 months, 2 years, let's do it. So I pled guilty and that was probably, in that sense you're asking, the funny, violent crimes, that was probably the most dramatic one, yeah.
Spanian, how dangerous would you say the streets of Sydney are in certain areas?
All right. How dangerous are the streets of Sydney? Sydney culture Sydney gang culture, Sydney crime culture has changed a lot, right? 20 years ago, early 2000s, late 90s, Sydney was more of a Sydney versus the coppers, fuck the government. Sydney was more about ripping off banks, flying through the streets in stolen cars, a big fuck you to the police, cop and chasers, this and that. We weren't working in gangs to fight each other. We didn't turn each other. No one gave a fuck about what your postcode was. It don't matter. Who gives a fuck? No one cared about the number of people in your gang or what your gang's called. That wasn't a thing. It was who you are and how you hold yourself and how much money you make. And you know, that was what it's about. That has changed a lot. All right. Sydney culture, Sydney gang culture and crime has changed a lot. And nowadays it is a lot like that. It's people in Sydney in gangs fighting each other, people fighting over the fucking name of their fucking suburb and the stupid postcode they have and stuff like that. And so now now you get around Sydney, you don't see banks getting robbed. You don't see WRXs and Nissan Skyline GTRs flying through the streets with 30 highway patrol behind them. You don't see none of that good crime no more. You see fucked crime. You see people in one suburb killing people in another suburb and people just fighting amongst ourselves now, bro. Unfortunately, I'm sure they all have their reasons why and I'm sure it's really heartfelt, but to me, it's disappointing, bro. Like, yeah, it's people are murdering each other all the time now. You know, like in a lot of parts of Sydney, drive-bys, it's not such a knife thing. I know you're from England and you love knives. Here it's guns, right? Not going to pretend that's like Compton or something. Relax, but the guns aren't legal here, but people still have guns, right? So, but there's suburbs out in Western Sydney. There's drive-bys every 3 days. There's big wars out there. Lads are like blowing each other's heads off in the streets, and the police aren't even reporting it anymore. Like, there's savage shit going on here. Like, yeah, there's some fucking MS-13 type shootings out here where people are like demolished bodies and that. But yeah, to me, it's disappointing. You know, I like that old Sydney. It's like us versus the police. How good do you drive? What bank can you rob? How many stackers can you make? You know what I mean?
And so, Spanian, I guess when did you make that change to become who you are today?
How did I become an Australian famous personality?
As well, because everywhere I went, when I said, who should I interview, your name came up more than anyone else's.
Of course, more than anyone. I'm the personification of Australian culture, Australian street culture. I was there since the beginning. The boys who are one generation older than me, I call the older boys, were the originators of the way we talk, the way we dress, the way we hold ourselves. So I was a kid witnessing that firsthand. That's been filtered out through the generations now. So a lot of people admire me for what I had witnessed and what I'd done in my life. So during my last sentence, I was over crime, right? For the reason that I'd been a junkie at the bottom that would steal your handbag and steal your laptop out of the car. As small as you can get, to a good-looking, muscly drug dealer with chains and cars coming out my ass, right? I've done it. So, and the last sentence was like just under 6 years, 5 years, 10 months, whatever, for that. So I sat in there in my last sentence and I thought, look, I'm not a fucking idiot. I'm not going to play the same game over and over. Like, I'm 31 years old, 36 now. This is 5 years ago. I'm 31 years old. I've given away my teenage years. My entire 20s was in prison. I ended up doing 13 years in prison. 13 years all up, boys' homes and prison, over the course of 17 years. So I missed everything. Anyone that I could have become, anything that I could have done up until that point was thrown in the bin. And I said to myself, like, what do I do from here? Do I get out and I be a cool drug dealer again? Like, oh yeah, mad, I'll just do that all again. And it's like, what's there to do? So I thought, fuck it, that's it. I'm going to live my life now. You know what I mean? I had a kid by then who, my son was born while I was in prison. I got out, he was already in primary school, missed all of that. I thought, that's it, bro. You know, I'm moving on. There's more to Anthony. There's more to Spanian than I fuck with in prison. So did I know what I was going to do? No, I didn't. But I knew what I was not going to do. I'll tell you this one thing. Since 2002, I remember I was 16 in Baxter Juvenile Detention Center. I started rapping, bro. I started writing verses, lad, you know what I mean? And I used to admire Bone Thugs and Wu-Tang when I was young. And, you know, I'd try to write like fast, like Crazy Bone, my favorite rapper ever, but write with the intelligence of Inspector Deck, top 3 favorite rappers ever. And back then in Australia, up until very recently, rapping was for fucking idiots. Rapping is something a fucking idiot does. Jail, boys' homes. If you're rapping, if you go to one of the boys and you start saying, yeah, bro, this and that, you know, that, they're like, bro, shut the fuck up, 50 Cent, you're an idiot. Like, are you a spinner? Are you normal? Do you need medication? Like, rapping ain't cool. So rapping was a secret thing that I done from 2002 to 2015, 16, whatever. I noticed around 2016, 17, coincidentally, when I got out my last time and didn't want to do crime, I noticed that Aussie hip-hop was a thing amongst the younger generations. And I was already, God, stacks of raps like this, but I'm OG at rapping, lad, you know what I mean? So I started putting out raps. I thought I'm not going to know what I'm doing out here, but I'll get my brother to hold a mobile phone and I'll chuck it into iMovie and I'll chop it up and I'll upload some shit rap to YouTube. And bro, and it worked. It worked, brother. And I started out rapping, lad, and I learned what Instagram was. I learned fucking what all these stupid things were, you know, that I'm on today. I'm famous on Instagram and TikTok and all these dumb things. And I learned about them, made a YouTube channel and started rapping, and I got a big following here. And I think more than my raps, I think what they admired was who I was. They admired who I was and the stories that I have. And you can imagine I'm sitting here with a bunch of rappers that haven't been seen or heard 1/10 of what I have done. So I got out and like, I think they seem like, oh, look at this rapper, he's the real one, or however you want to say it, you know? So I played that part, and the very first time I got up, you know, I got a following, 40, 50K Instagram followers, whatever. And one time someone interviewed me. Someone asked me to do an interview, and I didn't know like interviews. You know, someone wanted to make a doco pretty much similar to what we're doing right now, except it was sitting on the side of a street in my hood in Woolloomooloo. You know, it's the first time I ever done one. And when you're in prison, when you're in the streets, you come from, you know that old saying, I don't know where the fuck everyone gets it from, probably some fucking movie, but it's like, real gangsters don't talk. Real G's move in silence. You know that shit. So I grew up with that shit, that mentality, you know what I mean? Like, I'm real. I'm not saying anything, bro. I can't talk about nothing, bro. That's for gronks. But I did, you know, and it was a big thing to overcome. And he's sitting there with a camera and he's saying, so like, what did you do when you were young? Like, searching and prison, much like you're asking me right now. And I was there, bro, and I was like, fuck, should I be saying this stuff? And I said, bro, and I just telling my own story, not talking about other people's stories. I don't have to. I've done enough myself, you know what I mean? I could go on for days if you want me to, but we only got 2 hours, brother. But telling my story, what I've been through and what I've overcome. And the first time I done that, the gates opened. And I noticed that all of these, my followers, whatever demographic they're from, They don't give a fuck about rap. They want to hear about me and my life and my perspectives and, they want to know the history of Sydney City and its streets and how we become who we are and what makes the lads in Sydney different from the rest of the world and how we prided ourselves. They loved it. So the first time I spoke, boom, hasn't stopped since. Here we are 3 years later, brother. 3 years later, brother. That's huge.
Spanian, could you tell me what's the worst memory of your life, please?
The worst memory, it's one of these two things. In 2008, I was in prison, of course, on the other side of the state, and my older brother, he was a heroin addict, and he overdosed and died. And I'm pretty sure he overdosed and died in his bed at home. And I'm pretty sure it was a suicide. He was a well-versed heroin addict, had been a heroin addict a long time. Heroin addicts know how to not overdose. When heroin addicts overdose, it's usually through reckless behavior, through moods that they're in, you know what I mean? It's actually not that easy to overdose on heroin, despite what you may believe. He overdosed on heroin and I was in prison and they didn't let me go to his funeral. So I dealt with that. My older brother overdosing and died. The only man in my life, my dad was long gone, the only man in my life overdosed and died, bro. And I wasn't there. And every day I dealt with my mum. She could barely talk. She could barely breathe on the jail phone in 6-minute intervals. I asked if I could go to the funeral, and because I had an escape risk on my file over silly shit, they didn't let me go. So that was obviously a very hard point in my life. And another thing that always sticks with me is that, so in 2011, my missus at the time was pregnant. I got locked up. I didn't get out until 2017. My son was born a few months after I went to jail or whatever. I got out, he was like 5 years old, in school already. So I missed everything. He knew me from jail visits and he loved me and he loves me with all his heart, you know what I mean? And I got out and I went home. And him and his mum were there, who's my ex-partner now. And but this shatters me. And I walked in said hello, and I walked up into his bedroom. And it's his bedroom, bro, and it's my 5-year-old son showing me his bedroom for the first time. And and he's showing me his toys and shit. And he says to me, he turned to me, and without the context, this doesn't sound sad, but I'll tell you why it's sad. He turned to me in the middle of showing me his cool room, and he said, "Dad, I love you." Sorry, bro, 1 sec. He said, "Dad, I love you. Can you keep me forever?" Like he was a pet. He said that. It's like he's been waiting to say it the whole time, right? Can you keep me forever? And I said, of course I can keep you forever, my boy. And the reason that's so sad to me is that like a year after that, me and his mum broke up. We don't get along. And I've never really got along since. And, she barely lets me see him. So it's like I lied to him, It's like he said, "Can you keep me forever?" And I lied. And here I am. And it's like I'm barely allowed to. I can see him, don't get me wrong, but a couple of hours here, a couple of hours there, So that's like, you can tell from my reaction to that, that's more sad than even my older brother dying. But anyway, they're the two saddest parts of my life, brother. I don't feel sad for myself or any of my life or the prison that I've done. 13 years in prison, seen horrific things, done horrific things. I don't feel sad for myself. I feel happy about my life. I don't care. Jail doesn't affect me. After all that jail made me into the man I am. And I'm out here making stackers off the internet while everyone else who didn't go to jail is digging holes in the street, aren't they? So I can't be too sad, can I?
had one wish, what would that be?
If I had one wish, it's just to have my 2 sons forever, more kids, and have them more happy, and protect them, teach them to be real men and women if I have daughters, and they're healthy. That's it. There's nothing else. I don't care. There's nothing else other than that.
And before we finish, Spanian, is there anything you'd like to say?
Anything I'd like to say? That's a hard one. I'm very good at talking when you're the director, but when you leave it very open-ended like that, I'm like, there's too many lights, there's too many cameras, bro, I'm lost. Nah, not much, brother. It's just me, Spanian. You want to know what Sydney City's about? Have a look at me, brother. The personification of it, you know? Yeah, we do say, g'day, mate, shrimp in the fucking barbie or whatever the fuck you think we say here, but we also talk like me. I am Australia, I am Sydney City, lad. What's doing, brah? We're not to be fucked with.
That was sick.
Yeah, brother.